Imagine being the world's strongest mage, dying in a legendary war and waking up 20 years later as a disgraced level 1 noble. Oscar Crucian was supposed to be a joke, but his enemies didn't realize he is still the Grand Magus at heart. Now he is deflecting high-speed magic bullets and shredding elite assassins with spells they thought were impossible. This isn't just a comeback, it's a reclamation. How did a dead legend end up in the body of a failure? Let's rewind. In a graveyard of his own comrades, blue light leaking from his shattered body. He's the last man standing. Extending his glowing hands, our boy screams into the void. Answer ME. If there's anyone still alive out there, respond. He scans the blood-soaked field, begging the bodies to move or groan while magic swirls around him, and he makes one final plea. Looking up at the stars with blood on his chest, the Tower Master asks, "So this is how it ends? Am I truly the last one left?" The reflection in Oscar's eye shows a dark-haired figure with massive horns standing behind him. That figure is the Demon Emperor, the monster who united the Demonkin to wipe out humanity. This man led a brutal crusade, driving humans to the edge of extinction with fire and blood to unite his kind. The world was at the brink of annihilation when a monstrous creature prepared to feast on a crying infant. Oscar Sage refuses to let it happen and triggers a massive magical explosion that blasts the monster back with ancient runes. A glowing green shield envelopes the baby, protecting it from the surrounding flames and chaos. Our protagonist reaches out to the child, recalling how his mages from the White Tower formed the final defense. Standing before his army of robed mages, Oscar wagered everything to stop the Demonkin from crossing into their world. The Demon Emperor gets blasted by purple energy as Oscar's final play diffs the monster. Blinding magical energy consumes the battlefield in a massive light show that wipes away everything in its path. The gamble worked. The Demon Emperor's severed head lies submerged in a pool of blood with his eyes closed in defeat. Edna Sol Laplas confirms the time of death is 3:12 a.m. while Oscar slumps among the corpses. This is Edna Sol Laplas, the last dragon and an observer of history who records everything that happens. She delivers the bad news first. The White Tower is half destroyed, its mages are dead, and its research is ash. The good news is that some of his apprentices survived. Oscar Sage coughs up blood, satisfied with that much. When asked if he regrets his choice to save his mages over the tower, the Grand Magus declares, "No, I do not." Offered a chance for final words, our boy remains silent with his blood-stained hands held against the dark sky. Finally, he asks Edna to watch over the young ones before she gives him a respectful bow and a soft laugh. Oscar questions why a dragon would bow to a mere human, but Edna says he is worthy of it. She promises the continent will never forget the White Tower's sacrifice, and the protagonist simply closes his eyes. Standing in a dreamlike field of flowers, Oscar wishes he could have lived just for his own people even if he were a villain. He smiles at his apprentices one last time before the reality of his injuries sets back in under the starry sky. The Grand Magus of the White Tower is officially dead, his life fading as a beam of light connects to the stars. The final casualty list is brutal, with over 100 high-level mages wiped out. Our boy really stood on business to the very end. Bright light shines over the city, where the grand, dark White Tower stands tall among the falling green leaves. A man with black hair lies in bed while his blue-haired attendant, Fran, waits by the arched window. A single leaf drifts through the air and lands right on our boy's hand. Oscar Crucian springs up with elongated nails and wild eyes. Startled by the movement, Fran flinches and spills his water basin. The attendant immediately starts scolding him, shouting, "Oscar, look what you've done. I was only trying to change your washcloth." Our protagonist can only stare back in confusion. Fran continues his rant about terrible sleep habits while Oscar touches his chest. He wonders why he was left so exposed. His heart starts racing as his skin turns red. He remembers the cold truth that he was already dead. Memories of the Demon Emperor shredding his heart with a dark blade flood back. He remembers the blood and the absolute certainty that his life was over. A door slams open and Sir Maxim storms in. The blonde man glares at Oscar and sneers, "So you're finally awake, no longer a door." Maxim shoves Fran aside to confront Oscar on the floor. He's surrounded by an angry aura and declares he's going to teach the patient a lesson today. Still on the ground, Oscar wonders how he's even drawing breath. Maxim smirks and identifies him as a White Tower mage based on his robes. Sitting up, the MC demands an explanation and warns, "Explain what's going on, and watch your tone. I don't tolerate disrespect." Fran is terrified while Maxim's temper hits the ceiling. Maxim's face twists with pure rage as his red eyes glow. The man swings his hand for a strike, calling Oscar insane for acting high and mighty. Oscar prepares a counter, wondering if this guy is a Demonkin assassin. He forms a wind shield in an instant and plans to snap the attacker's wrist like a twig. Oscar mocks the incompetent attack, but his defense suddenly gets diffed and vanishes. He's left wide open and completely stunned. Looking at his hands, he realizes his magic is pathetic. He wonders how his power could be this weak. Maxim just snaps his fingers and laughs it off. He decides to postpone Oscar's punishment for embezzling research funds until he's recovered. After the door shuts, Oscar is left reeling. He can't believe his shield failed so fast. Fran calls him strange for picking a fight with Maxim. Oscar checks his internal state and realizes his mana circuits and purity are total trash. Screaming for answers, the MC asks what day it is. Fran tells him it's September 21st and that he's been out cold. Oscar thinks he's been out for 5 months, but Fran corrects him. He's only been unconscious for a single day. He orders Fran to bring him Lloyd, Gilead, or Sasha to get some real answers. Fran is genuinely shocked and asks if he's suffering from mana shock. She's confused why he's naming traitors and the Tower Master. Oscar screams in denial when Fran explains that Lloyd ditched them and Gilead stole a grimoire. Our boy is standing on business even while his world is falling apart. He can't believe Sasha is the Tower Master since he remembers her as a 5-year-old. Fran tells him his math is off by 20 years. Fran sighs at his overactive imagination, but admits his lies are weirdly convincing. Looking out the window, Oscar tries to process the impossible situation. The weight of it all hits him, and he clutches his head in total shock. Oscar Crujan sits in a large chair, staring out at the world 20 years after his death. He can't believe his eyes as he looks at the bustling city streets. Everything has changed so much it's almost blinding. Observing the cars and streetlights, the protagonist tries to recall their names. He realizes all this technology exists because of arcane engineering as a happy family passes by in the background. Oscar thinks about how much his old mages would have loved this world. Back when he lived, everything was crumbling and filled with people who had already given up. He stops dwelling on the past and decides it's time to figure out exactly whose body he's occupying. The original owner was a level 1 mage from a fallen noble family who was taken in by the White Tower. Oscar notes the guy at least had a decent face. Looking at the glowing blue symbol on his chest, he sees his mana circuits are sealed. The protagonist is technically incompetent for a 20-year-old, still stuck at level 1. Desperation drove the original Oscar to embezzle funds for illicit elixirs. This glowing red potion is what caused him to collapse after he consumed it. The sage realizes the elixir was meant to multiply mana, but it ended up killing the previous owner with an overload. The MC's eyes snap open as blue mana starts to glow around him. Our boy sits up as a powerful aura surrounds his hands. He wonders how a level 1 mage could have this much mana, realizing this new era is something else. A blue mana explosion leaves purple and red splatters on his fingers. He looks at the residue, questioning what is happening. Dark oily liquid drips onto the floor. Oscar stares at it with wide eyes. The substance sizzles and smokes on his hand. He realizes it's poison and wonders why it was inside this body. A smirk crosses his face as he says, "I see now." Piecing it together, he realizes the elixir wasn't a cheap knockoff. It was actually extremely potent and expensive, but the original Oscar never knew the truth. The powerful elixir he bought was actually laced with a deadly poison. He notes this poison is way too powerful to be meant for a weak mage. Clenching his fist, he realizes no one would have even noticed the trap if he hadn't taken over. Standing up, he declares, "I don't know who dared to toy with my soul, but in the end." Reaching for the bottle, he acknowledges his enemies accidentally gave him the second chance he wanted in his final moments. Holding the ornate bottle, he vows to live this life for his people alone. He smirks and tells the previous owner's soul, "Oscar Crujan, in exchange for lending me your body, I will seek revenge for you." As far as new beginnings go, he's standing on business. On the outskirts of Siren, news arrives at a large building. A man shouts out that the shop just sent word. The boss reclines on a couch and tells his subordinate to watch his tone. After an apology, he demands to know the news. Slamming a bottle on the table, the boss learns the shop was completely trashed by a mage. He yells, "What? Who the hell would dare do that?" He is confused because the target only knows theory and should be dead from the elixir. The subordinate worries about the White Tower, but the boss reminds him that a White Tower mage was the one who hired them. Looking at the client's ring, they realize they were working for a high-ranking mage. Their conversation is cut short when a sudden presence appears, making them shout, "Who the hell are you?" Oscar Crujan stands in the doorway wearing elegant mage robes and glowing with power. The boss is completely cooked as he realizes exactly who just walked in. Oscar Crujan tracks the scent of herbs to this hideout. Following the trail left in the bottle, the MC notes that way more people are involved in this mess than he expected. He sighs, "What a hassle." Stepping into the room, Oscar faces the boss in the brown jacket. The boss demands to know how he got there and if he destroyed the shop. Oscar confirms his handiwork and says, "I'm more interested in the little conversation you two were having. Why don't we keep that going?" The boss's face darkens in the shadows as he commands his men to finish him. His subordinate in the blue vest immediately leaps over the table to strike the MC. Watching the attack come in, Oscar's blue eye starts to glow with power. Seeing the aggression, he declares, "If that's how you want it, I see no reason to hold back either." Oscar unleashes a wind blade slash that cuts through the air with green energy. The subordinate is hit instantly and collapses to the floor, groaning in pain as he bleeds out. The subordinate's severed head rolls across the floor. Looking down at the mess, the MC thinks it reminds him of the demon emperor's own head. Screaming the name Bart, the boss jumps up in a rage. Oscar stands there completely unfazed by the headless body at his feet. Consumed by fury, the boss pulls his pistol and starts firing rapidly. He shouts, "You son of a," while emptying the magazine. Bullets fly toward the MC, but he watches them with a smirk. His windshield catches the projectiles effortlessly, though he wonders how something with no mana packs so much firepower. The boss is losing his mind after seeing his bullets stopped in midair. Oscar smiles at the suspended metal and realizes these are what the locals call bullets. This guy is standing on business as he deflects the bullets right back at their owner. The boss screams in agony as his own lead tears through his head and chest. Dropping to the ground, the boss is helpless as Oscar steps on him. The MC informs him that no one is coming to save him because he blocked all sound from the room. Sitting on the couch while the boss bleeds out, Oscar explains that he used a sound binding spell. It is not the high-level silence spell the boss suspected, but it keeps the noise from escaping just as well. Leaning in, Oscar asks who hired them to mess with his elixir. When the boss hesitates, the MC stomps his foot directly into the man's face, making him scream. Oscar's eyes glow with a dark aura as he realizes the boss wants to play the hero. He uses a swirling energy to distort the man's face in a brutal show of force. The boss lets out a blood-curdling scream as the blue magic pulses through his body. He starts convulsing on the floor from the sheer agony. Our protagonist cooks the boss by forcing a massive amount of air into his body. He states that he hates torture because it gets too loud, so he demands the man start talking immediately. Trembling and pleading for mercy, the boss finally breaks. Oscar snaps his fingers to ease the pressure and tells him to spill everything about the client. Panting for breath, the boss reveals that a client gave him money and the elixir to sell to Oscar for cheap. He claimed the MC would not be able to resist it. The boss explains that the client wore a large hood to hide his face, but he carried a ring from the White Tower. He also recalls a very distinct peppermint scent coming from the mysterious figure. Oscar notes the peppermint scent for later, but ignores the ring since it was likely a fake trail. The boss mentions that the White Tower is currently a mess due to the exile of the Four Towers. This catches Oscar's attention immediately. He asks the man what he means by the exile of the Four Towers, questioning why a mage would know more than he does. The boss crawls across the floor, claiming the elixir messed with his memory. He offers to show Oscar documents to prove he is telling the truth. After fumbling through some drawers, the boss hands over several folders and points to a pile of money on the table. Oscar takes the records and starts processing the info. Gripping the documents, the MC realizes his first priority has to be checking on the current state of the White Tower. It turns out the White Tower is a disaster, ranking the lowest among all towers despite 30 years of tax breaks. The Imperial Court is even preparing a declaration because the tower lacks any high-level magic. Oscar is confused because he left specific records for Edna to prevent this exact situation. He decides he has to investigate the tower's decline personally. Curious about the competition, Oscar asks what the other four towers have been doing. The boss quickly answers, eager to stay on his good side. The Golden Tower in the east has used lightning magic to start a revolution in engineering. They have basically diffed the rest of the world by creating streetlights and cars. Down in the south, the Azure Tower dominates everything related to water and agriculture. They currently run the entire potion industry as well. A fiery red sword stands in a scorching desert, representing the Crimson Tower in the west and their focus on monster extermination. Oscar Crujan sifts through records before asking his subordinate what the White Tower is currently doing. The man hesitantly answers, THEY run, a delivery service. Shocked by the pathetic news, the MC stares back in complete disbelief. Slumped over his documents, the protagonist processes the revelation and stammers, "D-delivery." Covering his face, Oscar asks if they are literally shipping packages. The attendant confirms this, explaining that their flying Wind Riders are the fastest couriers around. Questioning the name Wind Riders, our boy recalls when White Tower mages were compared to dragons and eagles, commanding the battlefield with grace. Oscar demands to know who thought this was a good idea, and Fran reveals it was the current tower master. Our hero mutters, "One of my own mages. Great." Oscar questions how the Azure Tower stole the industries for water and potions, since those were always the most profitable. The Azure Tower holds a total monopoly on the potion market now. 20 years ago, the White Tower owned that industry, but their research legacy burned to the ground. Looking at the records, Oscar sees that the Azure Tower sells clean water at high prices and charges for making it rain in drought zones. Shocked that anyone pays for water, Oscar waves his hand dismissively. He declares, "So they're making fools of themselves to make a few coins. I tease water, drink from a well." Tapping the documents, the protagonist summarizes that the White Tower is broke. Their last chance to prove they belong is the Night of Reverence in 7 months. While the subordinate gasps for air on the ground, Oscar finds a ledger full of arson and assault. He is standing on business as he looks through the evidence of their crimes. Standing over the kneeling boss, Oscar declares, "You're human garbage." The villain collapses onto the table, completely broken. Walking away with a black book, the hero tells the man to try being a decent person in his next life. Dawn breaks over the White Tower as he moves on. Stepping into a room filled with books, the MC groans about what a long day it has been. Slumping into a chair, Oscar wonders why his stamina is so pathetic. He looks at his hand, doubting he can cast a high-level spell right now. Attempting to cast the Wind Archive magic, he watches as the blue energy scatters into the air. This body is nowhere near ready for that level of power. Placing a hand on his chest, Oscar decides to run a mana scan to see what is going on with his system. Reaching for a dark book, the protagonist prepares to study his own history to figure out who he really was. Rapidly flipping through the pages, he searches for any clues regarding his past. A fire engulfed a mansion years ago, leaving Oscar Crucian as the only person to survive the blaze. Recognizing his genius, every mage tower and faction tried to recruit the young boy as soon as he appeared. During his time at the Imperial Academy, he scored perfect marks for 6 years straight and published brilliant research papers. Reading the book, our hero wonders why such a genius stayed at level 1, realizing the people around him must have been disappointed. Oscar's eyes widen as he finds the entry regarding mana deficiency syndrome. The records state he would have been a Grand Magus if not for this condition. It seems the syndrome diffed his entire potential. Seeing the report, he understands why he was stuck at level 1 despite knowing magic better than anyone else. He simply could not use it. A voice announces that the mana scan is complete. Looking at the results, Oscar spots something that leaves him totally confused. Oscar stares at the holographic screen, realization hitting him hard. "This isn't mana deficiency syndrome." He shouts that someone deliberately sealed his mana circuits. Our boy is locked in as he stares at the screen, shouting, "He wasn't sick. Someone sealed his mana circuits." Records describe how mana deficiency prevents proper cycling, capping a mage at level 3. Standard circuits require 20 channels, but this syndrome makes that impossible. Standing up with newfound aura, the MC realizes he isn't naturally defective. Someone went out of their way to sabotage him. Walking through the library, he figures the original genius must have known the truth. He starts searching the shelves, hoping for a hidden journal or some notes left behind. Thinking back to Fran calling the original Crucian a washed-up mess, our hero slams his hand down. He suspects the incompetence was a total act to survive whoever wanted him dead. Everything starts making sense, from the illicit elixirs to the isolation. Surrounded by stacks of research, he vows to untie the knot of his sealed circuits. Sifting through the desk, Oscar stops when he spots something unexpected. Resting his hands on a mysterious blue book, he finds a text titled Reinterpreting Basic Magic. Opening the pages reveals complex diagrams and a system called Kingboard. His eye widens as he scans the diagrams for adapting White Tower magic. The notes propose turning the defensive wind shield into an attack modeled after a spinning bullet. "This modified wind shield, it's practically the same concept as mine," he says. The theory completely flips the old defensive models on their heads. Pointing at the complex notes, the hero realizes the original Crucian built several original spells from scratch. Contemplating the genius of his predecessor, he realizes the man ran every single test in his head since he couldn't actually cast. Flipping through the research, Oscar confirms that the original's grasp of theory is on par with his own. Reflecting on the author's hard work, he sees a message left by a mage on the edge of a great trial. "May this book stir up even the faintest breeze in the White Tower." Looking at the desk, Oscar realizes the boy bore all that weight and isolation alone. Respecting the boy who never succumbed to fate, the MC walks away from the desk to find a place to rest. Meditating as a glowing symbol appears, he vows to the original spirit, "I'll take care of what you had to leave behind." He promises to make the saboteurs pay for diffing the original mage's potential. Waking up in a lush, serene garden, the MC looks around in total confusion. Recalling that everything went dark after he broke through another circuit, he hears a voice calling for Master. Startled, he looks up to see his past self, Oscar Sage, smiling at 3 students in white cloaks. "Today's lesson will be out here, that all right?" he asks. Trapped in a memory, Oscar Sage realizes he's under the curse of dreams from a rat baron in the demonic realm. Straining under the weight of dark magic, he concludes that he gets dragged into the past every time he falls asleep. The MC realizes this curse is engraved into his soul, not just his old body. It followed him even into this new life. Deciding the dream isn't a nightmare, he settles into the role of teacher. His blonde student asks, "So, what were we supposed to learn today?" Surrounding himself with glowing symbols, he explains that mana is divided into augmentation, acceleration, harmony, and anomaly. A young Lloyd Schultz asks if the White Tower focuses on harmony. Oscar confirms it the perfect match for wind magic, while Sasha asks if every tower has a preference. Addressing Lloyd, Sasha, and Gilead, he explains that the Golden Tower loves acceleration for speed, while the Crimson Tower picks augmentation for raw firepower. A young Gilead Dominic raises his fist and shouts to Oscar Sage, "Master, I want to be the acceleration type. I just can't stand slow things." Oscar smiles gently and explains it isn't a choice because you are born with your mana type. Red-haired Sasha asks how they can determine their type. Drawing a circle on the grass with a stick, Oscar says it is easier than she thinks. He instructs her to hold up her index finger and try a specific spell. Sasha looks down at the new incantation and needs a minute to process it. Oscar tells her to take her time. A faint blue spark emerges from her fingertip while someone shouts that something is coming out. Oscar watches his 3 students and tells Sasha her magic is balanced and not too fast or strong. "You're a harmony type, Sasha." Since she is the same type as her master, she smiles broadly and decides she likes it. Gilead and dark-haired Lloyd watch closely. Eager to try, Gilead produces a blue spark. Oscar tells him he got his wish and confirms he is an acceleration type. Oscar announces that Lloyd is next. The boy produces a glowing blue mana rose, which Sasha thinks is pretty. Oscar reveals the surprise. Lloyd is him as the ultra-rare anomaly type. Lloyd looks concerned at his mana rose and asks if there is a way to change it once it is set. Oscar knows the anomaly type is the rarest, making up only 0.2% of mages, and it is impossible to change. Oscar processes Lloyd's desire to switch to harmony type to be like him. He touches his chin and goes, "HMM? Is that so? Now that's a problem." Oscar tells the boy he planned to give him the most one-on-one lessons and asks if he should find a way to change it. Lloyd blushes and realizes he would get the most attention from his master. Oscar confirms that an anomaly type needs the right teacher to go far. Sliding closer, Lloyd responds, "Actually, anomaly doesn't sound so bad now, but only if you promise that I get the most lessons." They seal the deal with a pinky promise. Present-day Oscar Crucian reflects on these memories. He realizes Lloyd was always the one hounding people about promises. Our boy looks down with a slight smile. He remembers that no matter how mature Lloyd tried to act, he was still a kid. A soft, crackling sound comes from a speaker on the wall. Oscar blinks awake on a blue couch as a voice announces a message from the broadcasting office. The broadcast orders Mage Oscar Crucian to report to Research Lab 4202 immediately. He sits up and wonders how long he was asleep. Walking through a doorway, he checks his progress. He has unlocked 12 out of 20 circuits, leaving 8 to go. He knocks on the lab door. Reaching level 2 is a big win as his mana circuits split into 2 lines. A voice tells him to come in. He enters a grand office and finds Sir Maxim. Maxim asks how his body is holding up since his memory has been slipping. Oscar confirms the memory issues. He realizes Sir Maxim Visk is an elder magus of the White Tower. This man was his fellow mage back in the day. Oscar thinks about Maxim's career. He joined a few years after Oscar and has already become an elder. In a flashback, a young Maxim follows Oscar around and calls him Master, which was endearing. Maxim catches Oscar smiling and asks what is so funny. He has serious aura as he looks over the documents. Maxim reveals serious news. He received a report that Oscar killed the Gordon family boss and their enforcer. Maxim asks if Oscar disagrees with anything in the report. Oscar confirms it is true, but insists he had a good reason for the kills. Oscar reveals the truth. "They tried to assassinate me." Maxim's eyes widen in surprise. Dropping a gold ledger and a pouch on the table, Oscar explains the elixir was poisoned. Maxim holds the ledger with a serious expression and realizes Oscar went to confront them after the attempt on his life. Maxim checks the gold and the ledger. The numbers add up and the book contains other assassination contracts. He declares, "Understood. I'll close this as a case of self-defense. Oscar thanks him and asks for a personal favor. He wants to speak with the Tower Master. Maxim notes they used to have heated debates about magic. Maxim recalls the debates between Oscar and Sasha. He tells Oscar he will have to wait at least 6 months. Oscar is shocked by the delay. Maxim explains that Sasha is away on a major commission handling fieldwork herself. The tower is short on high mages. Maxim admits this isn't something to be proud of. Oscar asks for her level and learns she's a level 7 high mage. Our boy is built different because he was nearly level 9 at her age. Expecting her to be at least level 8 given her talent, he asks, "SH's only AT7. Sir Maxim asks if our boy is practicing offensive magic again after seeing a report about a body with a suspiciously clean cut. Oscar plays it cool and replies, "I practice now and then when it crosses my mind." Maxim is satisfied and dismisses him. Oscar exits the room while a white-haired man peeks through the doorway, catching Maxim's attention. Smiling as he enters, the Deputy Tower Master of the White Tower asks if Maxim was being too hard on the boy. Hamel mentions he only stopped by to make sure Maxim wasn't being too harsh. Hamel admits he can't help worrying since he brought the kid here himself. Examining the report, Maxim realizes the precision of that cut required serious effort and figures Oscar must have been training hard in secret. Maxim reevaluates the MC, admitting he might have underestimated his work ethic. The two mages prepare to leave for an elders' meeting where Elder Fidelina is already waiting. The elevator reaches the 10th floor. Walking through a lush conservatory, the protagonist reflects on the mages from his dream before noticing how empty the place feels. An old man in overalls spots him and calls out. Walter from Tower Maintenance introduces himself, saddened that the rumors of the MC losing his memory were true. He mentions they used to chat all the time back in the day. Our boy realizes just how far the memory loss rumors have spread. Walter explains he calls him young Oscar because the previous Tower Master was the great Oscar to him. The MC listens as the old man shares his long history with the White Tower. When the MC asks for his company again, Walter reveals he's leaving the tower soon. Oscar is caught off guard and asks, "You're leaving?" Having served 3 different Tower Masters, Walter is now the last person left in his entire department. He remembers a time when the previous Oscar stood before the tower and told everyone to take pride in their purpose. Walter blushes while admitting that speech made him feel like he truly belonged, but he has decided to step down anyway. The news shocks our boy, but Walter explains that the lack of funding has made the tower's decline obvious to everyone doing maintenance. Next month is his 40th anniversary, which usually comes with a massive service bonus. Our boy realizes what is happening and asks, "Is this about the long service bonus?" Non-mages normally receive a plaque and 200,000 vels after 40 years, which is enough to buy a house in a major city. Walter knows the tower is broke and refuses to let mages take dangerous commissions just to pay for his retirement. He considers this place his second home and won't accept the money. Realizing the White Tower is basically cooked financially, Oscar regrets looking down on the Azure Tower for their focus on making coins. He admits they built a successful era through their effort and clenches his fist so hard his knuckles bleed. Seeing the blood, Walter grabs the MC's hand and asks why he is clenching his fist with so much intensity. Walter is leaving in 2 weeks, so he takes a moment to wrap the hero's hand in a clean bandage. Oscar tells the old man he wants him to stay, but Walter insists that he should not feel obligated to help. With his eyes glowing with power, the MC stands on business and declares, "I will make sure you can stay." A mysterious woman in a wide-brimmed hat appears as a preview of things to come. Back at his desk, the protagonist wonders what he can actually do to fulfill his massive promise. Research and lectures take too long, and high-level commissions are out of reach for a level 2 mage. He looks at a newspaper and considers if potions are the only viable business left. His eyes go wide as he spots something in the paper and gasps, "Wait, is this it?" Vertical lines indicate a light bulb moment. Inside the Deputy Master's office, Fidelina is absolutely losing it over embezzlement. She yells, "I'm not letting this slide. This is embezzlement without a doubt." The blonde man, Elder Maxim, tries to play peacekeeper, but his defense is weak. Looking like she wants to incinerate someone, the treasurer and Elder Magus of the White Tower glares, while Maxim claims the culprit actually feels sorry for his crimes. Fidelina isn't buying it and screams, "And that's supposed to make it okay. Ever heard the saying, you give an inch, they'll take a mile?" Maxim sighs and tells her she doesn't need to worry about that. Red anger symbols surround her as she realizes the tower is so broke there is nothing left to steal. She points a finger and demands the guy get tossed into solitary, but Maxim points out that solitary training is pointless for a level 1 novice. Hamel Grimwiz watches the argument unfold from his seat. Setting down a teacup, Hamel Grimwiz agrees that solitary would be nothing short of torture for someone that weak. Fidelina starts to protest, but the decision is made. Reacting to the light penalty, she looks completely stunned and asks, "Only 3 times?" A voice cuts the debate short to move to the next issue. Getting back to the cold, hard facts, Fidelina explains they are broke and need to start making real decisions. She suggests selling off tools from the potion lab to cover living expenses before they go completely under. Hamel isn't having it and declares, "I can't allow THAT." He reminds them that this is a mage tower meant for studying truths and sharing knowledge, not a pawn shop. Looking at the mages working at their desks, the point is clear. You can't expect fresh air if the room stays sealed, and they shouldn't trade their future to eat today. Fidelina asks the real question, do we even have a future at this point? Maxim snaps back that they have already been waiting for 20 years for things to change. Sitting at his desk, Hamel tells the room it's time to face reality. He admits that even if some genius appeared who was strong enough to save the tower. Staring into his tea, he finishes that thought with the depressing truth that a genius like that would never actually come to the White Tower. A knock at the door cuts him off. Fidelina is annoyed that someone would barge into an elders' meeting, but Hamel tells the visitor to enter. Peeking into the room, Oscar Krujan introduces himself and apologizes for the intrusion. Standing before the big bosses, Oscar gets to the point. He looks at them with a smirk and declares, "I'd like permission to take on a business project." Fidelina is ready to throw hands as she reminds him he stole research funds a few days ago. She mocks him for having the nerve to ask for a business deal. Our boy ignores the heat and drops a newspaper on the table. He points out a flu outbreak in the Vince territory, and Hamel realizes it might be the legendary Cadena flu. There is no cure for Cadena since the formula was lost 2 decades ago. Oscar smirks because even the massive Azure Tower hasn't figured it out yet, and that's where he plans to strike. A confused little version of Hamel asks what exactly he is suggesting. Oscar stands on business and declares he is going to sell the Cadena vaccine. The elders are in shock as he promises to revive the exclusive business the White Tower once owned. Fidelina thinks this is a joke and calls it a waste of time. She asks how he expects to do what massive companies and high mages couldn't do for 20 years. Looking him dead in the eye, she asks with pure disbelief if a 20-year-old like him is really capable of such a feat. Oscar admits they all failed and that he's young, but he doesn't care. He touches his chest and asks, "I'm a genius, aren't I?" Fidelina's head nearly explodes as she starts listing every single one of his failures and the thousands of vels he's wasted on illicit elixirs. Oscar doesn't even flinch. She screams about his wealthy upbringing, but Hamel stops her cold. He reminds her that Oscar is here as an official mage with a formal proposal and tells her she is out of line. Tucking her tail, she offers a quick apology for her behavior. Oscar realizes she's the treasurer, which explains why she wants his head on a pike. He knows he's been a disappointment for 2 years, so he doesn't hold a grudge. Turning back to the master, he keeps that confident smile and asks them once more to consider investing in his plan. Oscar Krujan sports a sharp smile and declares, "I'm nothing like Oscar Crusian." He asks why they are so sure it's the Cadena flu and points them toward page 2 of the newspaper. Reading the paper, an older man sees that Archbishop Baldwin of the Order of Elterra changed his route. He's staying in Siren for a whole month, which Oscar finds incredibly suspicious. 7 archbishops represent the Order of Elterra, but piety is not the only requirement. You need a massive amount of gold to buy a seat as a cardinal. Archbishops use pilgrimages to bleed nobles and merchants for donations. Siren has been shrinking for 20 years, making it a terrible place for a money-hungry cleric to linger. Sir Maxim asks if the archbishop is there to offer a blessing. Oscar counters that it makes no sense to offer a high-priced blessing to a city that cannot afford it. Spinning a globe, Oscar explains the fixed pilgrimage path. The route goes from Siren to Mosque, Melbourne, and Greenwell, with the final stop being Vince. Oscar realizes the archbishop spent a full month in Knox before Siren. The man is clearly stalling at every stop to avoid reaching Vince for as long as possible. Hamel and the others listen as Oscar explains the stakes. If a disaster happens during a pilgrimage, the order labels it divine punishment, which would destroy the archbishop's career. Maxim realizes Baldwin already knows about the outbreak in Vince and is hiding. Fidelina admits the analysis is solid, but reminds them it remains a hypothesis. Master Hamel Grimwiz looks at the protagonist and acknowledges that he understands the proposal. Approving official funding is impossible because it would strip the other active mages of their support. Oscar starts to protest, but Hamel has a different plan. Master Hamel has aura for days as he decides to invest his own personal wealth into the project. Fidelina's jaw drops as she tries to talk him out of spending that fortune. Hamel can only provide 30,000 vels from his own pocket. Oscar begins calculating if that's even enough to begin development on a vaccine. The math hits Oscar hard as he realizes the amount is not even close to what he actually needs. Surrounded by alchemical tools in the laboratory, Oscar decides to pivot to Plan B. He checks his equipment and gets ready to work. The plan is to brew a sample first and then use it to pitch the Archbishop for the real funding. Fran watches from the background, noting how desperate the cleric must be. Sliding on his safety goggles, Oscar prepares for the experiment. He grins and decides to warm up a bit, leaving Fran wondering what's wrong with him. Red magic flows as Oscar focuses on the reaction. He cooks a bubbling red liquid in a flask and carefully transfers it into a smaller bottle. Checking the potion, Oscar is satisfied that his skills as a Grand Mage are still sharp. He brewed a recovery tonic as a warm-up, while Fran struggles to haul heavy sacks nearby. Fran lets out a pained cry, feeling like his spine is about to snap under the weight of the supply bags. Exhausted on the floor, Fran asks for a drink to keep from dying. Oscar offers him the fresh recovery potion he finished a second ago. Fran takes the small bottle and the long receipt for the herbs. Realizing the bottle is still warm, Fran asks if Oscar brewed it. Oscar casually confirms he finished it a second ago. High-quality herbs fill the sacks as Fran reports that the shopkeeper was annoyed. He took all the best inventory. Oscar hits Fran on the head after the boy suggests the tower might fail. He claims it was a reflex because of the bad omen. Rubbing his head, Fran asks for the next task. Fidelina told him Oscar would be helpless without help, but the MC tells him to start moving supplies. Grabbing 2 massive sacks himself, Oscar declares he doesn't really need an assistant. Oscar Crujan looks at the White Tower and its mages. He thinks they are all a bit crazy, but their flaws are exactly what the tower needs to grow stronger. Hauling heavy supplies, Oscar watches Fran serious. He thinks the boy is another tower misfit and wonders what he can really do. Surrounded by black lilybulls and crimson licorice, Oscar prepares the dangerous herbs. Fran thinks they need to boil the plants for 12 hours to remove the toxins, but the MC has other plans. Putting glowing leaves into a steamer, Oscar explains that boiling destroys the good properties along with the bad. He asks Fran if he knows about dumplings from the state of Yan, because the same steaming logic applies here. Oscar taps the golden pot and reveals that steaming keeps 98% of the herb's effects. Fran gets hyped about the profit margins, and our boy is definitely standing on business as he plans to reclaim the potion market. Fran asks if the detoxification is done. Oscar checks the pot and says they only soften the ingredients for the real work. Oscar prepares to strip the poison away. He activates a spell called Air Drain, sending purple energy swirling through the steamer. A mass of toxins floats above the pot like a dark cloud. Oscar tells the boy to watch closely while the energy begins to vortex. The swirling magical power condenses into a single glowing green orb. Mixing crimson licorice and mivra leaf with perfect precision, Oscar completes the recipe. He holds up a glowing blue bottle and declares, "There, that's the cure for Cadena flu." Oscar asks if that looked easy and tells a stunned Fran to give it a shot. The boy stares at the bottle in total disbelief. Fran worries about his own skills. He realizes dual casting 2 spells at once is usually impossible for someone at his level, but he tries to hide his nerves. Purple energy shakes in the boy's hands. Oscar notes the control is decent for a beginner, but he can see the kid is hitting a wall. Fran admits he cannot dual cast since he is only level 3. Oscar steps in and promises to show him the secret. The protagonist explains that dual casting is a mental trick. He tells the boy to imagine a divider in his head to separate the spells. Visualizing the mental split, Fran attempts to hold the energy together. Oscar tells him to go for it because he will learn something either way. Light explodes as the spells finally click. Oscar claps and says, "Congrats, you figured out dual casting." Fran cannot believe it was that simple. Fran gets annoyed that everyone treated this like some legendary secret. He is huffing and puffing after realizing he was overthinking it the whole time. Oscar explains that people usually hide their hard-earned secrets out of spite. While the MC talks, Fran begins processing the herbs with his new skill. Looking back at history, the MC recalls how soldiers on the battlefield shared every trick to survive. Tradition did not matter when lives were on the line. Fran smiles while holding a finished bottle. He realizes the White Tower needs this kind of open teaching to actually succeed. Oscar praises the kid for his potential. Fran says the MC is a great teacher, but Oscar is already aura farming as he teases the boy for his earlier skeptical face. Fran is ready to tackle the rest of the supplies immediately. Oscar watches the kid's enthusiasm with a smirk. Hundreds of bottles cover the floor after hours of grueling work. Fran is completely wiped out, but Oscar counts 514 cures. Maxim Visk slams the door open. He shouts that they have a massive problem. A report reveals the Azure Tower and Nutek met with the Archbishop. They are making moves in the city of Siren. Oscar reads the document with a heavy sigh. Maxim panics, fearing that if the rivals signed a deal first, their own cure is useless. Maxim tries to comfort the upset boy, but Oscar is not backing down. He stares at the report and declares that it is not over yet. Oscar asks if Cadena Flu is still a Class B disaster. Since it is, he tells Maxim there is one more thing they can try to turn this around. Travelers wonder if the Elder's flight speed beats most carriages, as they arrive at a private inn under the Siren sky. A knock at the door signals the arrival of guests. Archbishop Baldwin of the Order of Elterra calmly commands the attendant to show them in. Moira Main from the Azure Tower and Neil Briand from Nutek Pharmaceuticals enter. Moira offers a greeting of Elja and confirms their safe arrival. The Archbishop invites the pair to sit. He asks Neil about the progress on the Cadena Flu cure. Neil smirks and replies, "Everything is going according to plan." Archbishop Baldwin asks when the medicine will be finished. Neil explains they are entering the clinical testing phase before seeking Imperial Bureau approval. Neil laughs off the wait, noting that clinical trials take time. The Archbishop grows impatient and asks exactly when the remedy will be ready for release. Hearing the 6-month timeline makes Baldwin shout in frustration. He has a trip to Vince in 4 months and cannot wait that long. A knock interrupts the meeting. An attendant reports another mage is waiting. Baldwin demands to know who it is, while Neil remains confused since only 2 groups were expected. The door creaks open. A mysterious visitor steps inside and offers the traditional greeting of Elja with total confidence. Oscar Crujan bows and introduces himself as a level 2 mage from the White Tower. He looks up with a sharp smirk. Confusion fills the room. Moira insists they were the only ones invited, yet the Archbishop questions why another guest is present. The door opens again. A stranger steps in, casually asking if Elja is the correct way to greet the church. Oscar Crujan identifies himself as a mage from the White Tower. He stares the group down with a confident grin. Oscar makes his move, telling the room he has something that will definitely grab their attention. The Archbishop asks for his purpose. Oscar makes a bold declaration. "I've come to offer you a cure for the Cadena Flu." Baldwin mentions that others have already offered the same thing. Oscar wonders aloud if he arrived too late. The Archbishop reassures him. He notes that the rival preparations are nowhere near completion. Neil points an angry finger at Oscar. He shouts that it's a lie and questions how the White Tower could ever afford to make a cure. Baldwin asks for the boy's name once more. He looks Oscar in the eye and asks if he truly has the cure. Oscar places a wooden box on the table. He asks the Archbishop, who would dare speak falsehoods before the Archbishop of Elterra. The box opens to reveal a glowing blue potion. It is a sample of the actual Cadena Flu cure, leaving the room stunned. Neil tries to regain control by asking about delivery dates. He turns on Oscar, screaming that the White Tower mage is acting out of line, while Oscar mentions the need for Bureau approval. A realization hits Neil. He asks if the Bureau has approved this cure yet. Oscar admits that it hasn't happened yet. Neil smirks, claiming the White Tower is just as unqualified as anyone else. He brags about his ability to mass-produce the cure once approved. Oscar is locked in, as he reminds everyone that the White Tower actually created the cure first. Dismissing their claims, Oscar declares that the Azure Tower calling itself historic is laughable. Our boy is standing on business for the White Tower. Oscar Crujan glares with glowing blue eyes and demands, "What did you just say? I'll give you one chance to take that back." Neil Briand smirks and asks which tower was built first, mocking the fact that Oscar's group is only 5 years older. Neil mocks the 5-year gap as a grand tower shines in the distance. Neil stares down Oscar with the White Tower behind him, claiming every Azure Tower master has tried and failed to bridge their centuries of history. Clenching his fist, Neil reminds him that the White Tower controlled the entire potion market 2 decades ago. He dismisses the past as forgotten history before flinching in shock. A glitchy purple energy leaks out of Oscar as he asks if Neil really thinks no one remembers. Neil and Moira watch in concern, wondering how a level 2 could produce such an intense aura. Oscar decides to give him a reminder as a massive burst of power erupts. An attendant bursts through the doors holding a golden phone, yelling for his grace and apologizing for the urgent interruption. Oscar asks what the commotion is about. The attendant reveals the transmission is from Lord Vince. The news hits with massive impact. On the other end of the line, Archbishop Baldwin offers his deepest thanks for the Cadena Flu cure. Baldwin explains that the White Tower elder delivered the medicine quietly and the patients recovered within hours. Oscar listens with a subtle smile while the Archbishop calls it a miracle from the goddess. Oscar asks if there were any side effects. The Archbishop confirms everything is perfect and asks when the next shipment will arrive. Sir Maxim walks down the street, recalling how the Archbishop left the decision-making entirely to him. Baldwin is pure relief, as Oscar promises the second batch will be ready shortly. While the Archbishop celebrates, an angry man slams his fist on a table and shouts that this violates imperial medical law. A voice firmly shuts him down. Oscar mocks their lack of legal knowledge and asks if they have even read the wartime statute. His opponent snaps back, demanding to know what that has to do with anything. Reflecting on 20 years of peace, our boy realizes they have already forgotten the lessons of the past. In a flashback to the war against the Demonkin, he recalls how plague was a deadlier threat than any physical weapon. Oscar explains that waiting for approvals cost lives during the war, leading the king to add a special clause for medicine used during conflicts. The statute classifies any medicine used to treat the wounded during a conflict as a special remedy. A man in a blue uniform argues that this is not a war, but Walter explains there are 3 official conditions that qualify as a state of conflict. The man in blue looks stunned as Walter reveals the Cadena flu is classified as a Grade B natural disaster, making medical law completely irrelevant. The official tries to pivot by saying they will send their own cure, but Walter tells him he has already lost the plot. The moment the White Tower cure reached its destination, the contest ended. Archbishop Baldwin points out that he has already aligned with the White Tower. The man in blue sweats and tries to lower his price to negotiate. Baldwin slams his desk and screams, "Are you trying to buy MY honor with coin?" Oscar stands up and orders the man to leave his sight immediately. Oscar stands tall while the official retreats in total defeat. Our boy is standing on business with a smug smile. He tells Lord Vince that the patents for the cure and vaccine were already filed with the Imperial Court. Lord Vince is absolutely cooked as Oscar explains he now owes the White Tower royalties for every sale, or he has to trash his entire stock. Lord Vince storms out of the room with his blue cloak flaring. Oscar Crujan watches the man leave in silence. A man with short white hair bows to the Archbishop. He says, "I'll take my leave, Your Grace," while Oscar keeps a close eye on him from a distance. A magical breeze carrying glowing particles and green leaves drifts past the group. Oscar freezes the moment the wind reaches him. Oscar stares at the man in the black coat with a stunned expression, while the magic continues to swirl around them. Seeing the man triggers a memory of a blood-stained shirt. Oscar realizes there was a very distinctive peppermint scent that he can never forget. Drenched as if by rain, Oscar looks forward with a serious expression. This scent is the only thing he remembers from that night. Oscar stands before a closed door until a laugh from inside signals him to enter. The Archbishop gestures toward a seat and says, "Now then, come sit over here. We can finally talk properly." The negotiation starts with the Archbishop mentioning that other towers asked for 2 million vels. Our boy responds with a subtle grin. Holding up 5 fingers, the protagonist declares, "If they said 2, we'll take 5. 5 million vels, no more." The Archbishop is absolutely baffled by the price hike. A few hours pass, and someone is screaming at the White Tower. They are staring at a check for 10 million vels in total disbelief. Oscar shrugs off the success, while Fran and Maxim Visk tackle him with hugs. Fran calls him a little genius, while Maxim claims he always believed in him. Hamel Grimwiz holds the check with wide eyes. He wonders how anyone got the Archbishop to agree to such a staggering price. Standing before Hamel in the library, our boy explains there was a hidden cost. He flashes a confident smirk. Confirming the massive payment, the team celebrates the 10 million vels they secured for advertising. Oscar breaks down the scheme to Hamel. He convinced the Archbishop that claiming a divine revelation would help him secure a cardinal seat. Oscar smiles confidently as he explains that the Archbishop signed for 10 million vels, even more than he requested. He finessed the man into paying double for the chance at a promotion. Hamel is floored by the result. Oscar was supposed to pay back 3 times his debt, but he brought in 400 times that amount. Fidelina gives an enthusiastic thumbs up to the news. Hamel offers full support, and Oscar requests every level 4 mage they can find. Recruitment starts immediately. Fidelina asks what the notice should say as the tower prepares for a massive project. Grinning, Hamel tells her to announce that the potion lab is hiring high-level mages. He makes sure she mentions the best part of the job. Mages swarm the building a few hours later. They can hardly believe how crowded the place is as they gossip about the promise of free meat. Clapping his hands to get their attention, the MC asks for silence. The rowdy crowd completely ignores him and keeps shouting. He snaps his fingers and triggers a sound binding spell. The mages groan and cover their ears as the room goes quiet. Once he has their attention, he explains they are here to save lives with a new vaccine. He asks the group for their help. The mages aren't buying it. They whisper that the former failure has finally lowered himself to ask for help and suspect it is another scam. Oscar is low-key lost as he asks Fran if the mages hate him. Fran's response? He lists off every terrible thing the old Oscar did, from burning funds to being an arrogant, drinking disaster. A blonde-haired woman with green eyes named Fidelina greets the MC. Since the White Tower's entire archive was lost, she demands to know how he managed to produce a new potion. Oscar gives her a simple answer: I restored it. Fidelina shouts back in disbelief, while the other mages complain about the money he wasted in the past. Once our boy mentions signing a contract with the Order of El Terra, the group realizes the formula is worth more than gold. The mages demand to know why they should trust him with such a secret. Looking them in the eye, the protagonist admits he doesn't understand why any of them are still here in the White Tower. Fidelina's eyes glow with intensity, as she declares she wasted her time coming here. Fidelina turns to leave, claiming no one came to be insulted. Oscar stops her in her tracks by saying, I know what you've given up to stay. Shocked, the level 5 mage turns back as the MC lists her real name, Renau White, and the 7 major firms she rejected to remain at the tower. He moves on to the other elites, calling out Harrock Dryan for declining the Imperial Court and Decker Line for rejecting the Academy. Harrock is stunned that the MC knows his history. Next is a level 4 mage, who turned down the Golden Tower despite her talent for creative alchemy. Oscar addresses the whole room, noting that almost every mage there had better offers. He admits that if he were in their shoes, he might not have been able to say no. Fidelina wonders if the elders knew they were staying despite the offers. The protagonist explains that the elders hid the truth because they didn't want to burden the mages. Calling this the harshest winter in the tower's history, he acknowledges they could have easily left for a warmer place. Because they chose to stay in the cold, he asks the room, who could I trust? Oscar wipes away fake tears and jokes that if they refuse his offer, he and Fran will handle it alone. Fran yells at him for the crocodile tears, telling him not to group them together as low-rank mages. Goggles on, the hero gets ready to work while Fidelina watches him silently. She steps in to help, asking where to start with the equipment. Other mages follow her lead, shouting at everyone to get moving and set up the lab. Seeing the group work together, Oscar and Fran share a smile. The MC nervously clarifies that the meat they're getting isn't pork or rat, hoping for chicken. Wearing a white coat and glasses, he announces it's beef, and the mages have no chill as they erupt in a cheer. A week has passed, and the MC finds flower petals arranged in a heart on his lawn. He assumes Walter stayed behind after all. Relaxing on the grass, he reads about the end of the pandemic and his own nomination for a peace prize. While he smirks about the plan coming together, Fran sprints over with a clipboard. Pre-orders for the vaccine are already exploding. Fran lists the orders from the Northern Lords and the Imperial Palace, projecting millions in profit. Our boy is standing on business as he thinks about the worst being over. When Fran points out the sales will die once everyone is vaccinated, Oscar looks surprised. He didn't expect his assistant to be that sharp. The protagonist reveals he already has recovery potions ready to keep the money flowing. Fran is shocked that he restored the basic formulas, but the MC says they aren't ready for the legendary tier of the stars yet. A glowing purple bottle sits as a reminder of the tower's most famous healing elixir. This potion can allegedly bring back the dead, but releasing it now would put a target on his back. Using the Archbishop as a shield was his only way to make it safely. Oscar sends his assistant to find rare ingredients native to Siren. Fran loses it, claiming those items are impossible to find in this century. Fran is standing there with her mouth wide open in total shock and confusion. Looking completely drained, Fran yells at Oscar Crucian, "Are you out of your mind?" She demands to know if he brought her to the middle of nowhere to prove a point while he walks ahead with a smug look. Fran collapses next to a carriage wheel, complaining that they have to go on foot because the wagons are stuck. Oscar stands by the carriage and confirms that wagons can't pass this point. As they climb a grassy hill, Oscar tells her to hang on because they have only walked 10 miles. Fran is baffled by the word miles and asks if he is using a system that was scrapped nearly 2 decades ago. Oscar stops in his tracks, shocked to hear that nobody uses miles anymore. Fran explains they switched to the metric system after the war and that our boy is cooked after spending way too much time buried in his old scrolls. Oscar laments the loss of the old ways, noting that converting measurements was half the fun. He declares, "Goodbye mile, goodbye pound. It was a good run," right before Fran spots a cabin in the distance. Walking up a dirt path, they reach the rustic cabin and Fran knocks on the door. An older man with a white beard and glowing red eyes peers out, surprised they traveled the whole way on foot. Fran tells the man their wagon got stuck at the ridge, forcing them to walk. The man looks past their abandoned wagons in the distance and asks about the group approaching. A fleet of classic cars drives up the dirt path toward the cabin. One of the vehicles screeches to a halt, skidding across the grass. A man wearing a white suit and fedora points at the cabin and asks if the old man is finally in the mood to sell his land. Pointing aggressively, the man in the white suit repeats his demand to know if the old man is ready to sell. Ivan, the older man with the white beard, looks out from his home with a stern expression. Standing with his arms crossed, Ivan refuses to sell the land and declares, "You could build me a castle out of mithril, and I'd still say no." Devor Paul, the businessman, smiles smugly and claims he is offering 10 times more than anyone else while Fran asks Oscar what is going on. Ivan fires back that it is not Devor's problem. Devor gestures broadly, warning him to sell the land and enjoy his remaining time before factories ruin the area. Glaring at the businessman, Ivan is standing on business as he declares that nobody will build a factory here as long as he is alive. Devor turns his back and orders his subordinates to leave. Devor pauses at his car door, mentioning that he might have trampled some herbs on his way in. He extends his hand and says, "Here." Tossing a stack of money onto the ground, Devor tells Ivan the cash is for his trouble. The car door slams shut as the convoy drives away in a cloud of dust. Ivan sighs as he watches them go, while Oscar and his group stand nearby. Inside the car, a subordinate asks if the guys with the old man were from the White Tower. They wonder why the mages are there, and if they made a fortune off the recent vaccine. Devor tosses his sunglasses aside as a subordinate hands him a newspaper. The man mentions that the mages made quite a lot of money and tells him to read the report. Looking at the headlines, the businessman's expression turns serious. Devor slams a rolled-up newspaper against his subordinate's head, yelling at him for not mentioning this sooner. He starts biting his nails in a panic, worried that Ivan will never sell if he has the White Tower backing him. Shaking with anxiety, Devor calls for his subordinate and tells him to contact the mercenaries who reached out last time. When the man asks for instructions, Devor tells him to use his head. Striking his subordinate again, Devor decides to crash out by ordering them to make Ivan vanish. He wants the old man gone so they can buy the land at an auction. Devor says they have enough backing to handle the heat, but his subordinate is still worried about the mages hanging around. The man points out that dragging the 4 towers into a conflict will make it impossible to cover up. Ivan stares him down with a stern gaze, but Devor smirks and dismisses the concern entirely. He declares that the White Tower has already gone under and is no longer a threat. Lying on a grassy hill under the full moon, Fran mentions that Ivan is a good person for letting them stay and feeding them. Oscar looks at the stars and agrees. Ivan stands at his door, explaining that the road is dangerous after dark. He tells them, "I owe the White Tower more than you know." Fran looks surprised while Oscar asks for details about the man who arrived in the car earlier. Ivan explains Devor Paul spent 3 years buying land, and now only this plot remains. He warns that herbalists are vanishing because Devor wants to build the continent's largest factory zone. Oscar Crujan is stunned, asking why anyone would go that far, but Ivan remains calm. The man claims he's the one with the advantage. Clenching his fist, Ivan reveals he is a living national treasure in herbal cultivation. Fran realizes the imperial family protects him, which is why he hasn't been forced out yet. Oscar asks why the man refuses to sell such valuable land. Oscar looks surprised with wide eyes and asks, "Pardon." Later that night, Oscar and Fran lie on a grassy hill under the stars. Oscar calls Ivan a good man while Fran laughs at how the herbalist got embarrassed and ran back inside. The man clearly loves this land because it is his home. Looking up at the bright night sky, the protagonist admits he is jealous of how bright the stars are. Fran asks what exactly he is jealous of. Fran muses about what it's like to live a life that shines that bright, assuming a genius like Oscar wouldn't understand. Our boy responds by calling Fran plenty talented and thanks him for the sentiment. Oscar sits up and looks intently at his companion, stating he never gives out empty compliments. He wonders why anyone ever labeled Fran a troublemaker. Fran laughs it off and points back to the pretty stars. Reflecting on the past, Oscar mentions how you used to see stars even from the center of Siren. Modern street lamps ruin the view, and he finds it funny how inconveniences feel romantic once they're gone. Fran questions Oscar on his age since he sounds like an old man. Shifting the focus, the protagonist wonders if the herb industry can really make a comeback, noting they will need to talk to Ivan in the morning. Oscar flinches as a realization hits him. Sitting up abruptly, the MC looks worried. Fran thinks he's seen a ghost, but the hero clarifies that people are approaching. He senses 4 of them, though Fran doesn't feel a thing. Oscar stands up and orders Fran to get moving. If the boy can't detect them, they aren't here for a friendly chat. He warns, Looks like weave GOTGUESTS. A pink glow emanates from Oscar's mouth as he prepares to release a spell. A green-haired man with fangs runs through the night, questioning why Devor Paul finally stopped being a coward. An older white-haired man with him says he doesn't care about the risk as long as the pay is good. Jack, the leader in the red coat, orders his crew to stay sharp because mages might be on site. The crew assumes it's just the White Tower, which they think will be easy. The green-haired man actually hopes a mage is there so he can test his skills. The fanged attacker picks the lock on the door while Jack waits. He thinks it's too quiet and assumes the old man is already unconscious. Stepping into the rustic room with a dagger drawn, the intruder finds the situation almost boring. Thinking there is no mage in sight, the man feels let down. His eyes widen in shock as he realizes he isn't alone. Spinning around with his dagger, the attacker shouts in surprise. Oscar is already waiting with a glowing blue orb of energy. He tells the intruder that he caught on a little too fast before blasting him with a wind bullet. The red beam pierces the man's chest and sends him crashing to the floor. The hero diffs the intruder instantly, leaving him dead on the floor. This specialized wind spell reinterprets basic magic using firearm mechanics to maximize lethality. Stepping outside, Oscar notes there are 3 enemies left. His eyes widen as he spots the remaining intruders in the dark. Jack and his partner stand in the field, wondering where their companion went. Oscar steps out with a mocking smile and a finger to his lips. He tells them their friend is inside sleeping and they can go get him, though he might be out forever. The older man calls his fallen comrade pathetic for letting his guard down. Jack demands the location of the herbalist, promising to forget about the death if Oscar cooperates. The protagonist knows Jack is no amateur, and the villain quickly decides to hold a grudge after all. Jack leaps down and gives the order to kill. The older man begins a dark, swirling attack. The gunslinger crew member strikes down with his staff, unleashing a massive red energy burst. Oscar is standing on business, blocking the entire explosion with a blue magical aura. The attacker shouts in frustration after his strike is deflected. Oscar looks up with a confident smile and says, "Not bad, kid." The white-bearded member of the gunslinger crew yells in frustration. Oscar watches him with a smirk, blue magic swirling around him, and taunts, "Not bad, kid." The old man swings his staff, but the protagonist effortlessly dodges with a glowing orb in hand. His opponent grins and reveals a hidden short blade, declaring, "I doubt you realize this is an esoteric weapon. Tough break for you." Oscar focuses a powerful orb at his fingertips, red energy crackling as he states, "This is where you die." Our boy cooks the old man by flicking 2 blue orbs forward with incredible speed. He lets out a grunt of confusion before clenching his glowing fist and dismissively muttering, "Bit of a letdown, actually." The white-bearded man swings his glowing staff again and looks surprised when the hit connects. A magical vortex crackles at the point of impact. Disbelieving that a surprise strike could fail, the old man shouts that the hero still managed to land a clean shot. A man with short dark hair taunts Oscar, calling his secret weapon a joke. Oscar reacts with a shocked expression. The dark-haired man moves low and demands to know why the protagonist is walking away after winning. He levels a heavy gun at the MC's back, shouting, "You trying to mock me?" A beam of white light hits the dark-haired gunman in the eye, distorting his face. Oscar crouches as blue magic shatters around him, crackling with electricity from a sudden hit. The dark-haired man stands there with a fresh cut on his cheek, while a red-haired gunman appears in the distance. The shooter watches our boy fall back with a chest wound and says, "Shame." Standing over the fallen body, the red-haired gunman looks down. He tells Oscar that if he had dropped his guard for even a second, he'd be dead already. The white-bearded crew member asks if the fallen man was an ally. The gunman dismisses it, calling him a replaceable grunt. Wiping blood from his cheek, the dark-haired man calls it typical lowlife behavior. He looks at the red-haired gunman's weapon and asks if it is a toy. The gunman reloads his ornate weapon and calls the question insulting. He explains it has 3 spells woven into it: acceleration, augmentation, and piercing. Surprised that the dark-haired man figured it out, the red-haired gunman stares as his opponent wipes the cut. His response is simple, "Because I couldn't block all of them." The shooter smirks and admits that while the hero is arrogant, he definitely has the chops. Standing on a hill, the gunman offers Oscar a high-paying job. Our boy lies bleeding among the flowers and gives a blunt, "No thanks." Oscar says he knows he'd be stabbed in the back the moment he looked away. The gunman agrees it's possible and declares, "Then we're done talking," before a heavy impact occurs. Oscar lies face down behind a fence, thinking about how undignified it is for a former tower master to be hiding from bullets. He notes he has half his mana left and can't run forever. Watching from his hiding spot, Oscar times the reloads. The gunman stops after 2 shots and takes exactly 1.24 seconds to fire again, leaving 1 round in the chamber. Prepping his green magic, the MC decides to end this in that tiny window of time. He activates his acceleration and aura farms as he blurs past the fence. Oscar lunges through the air with his white robes flowing. The gunman turns his weapon and goes, "Oh, that way, huh?" Raising his gun, the shooter admits the speed is impressive. He mocks the protagonist, asking, "You think a human can beat Trinity?" The gunman pulls the trigger, and fire flashes from the muzzle. A fiery beam of light tears toward the ground. Oscar holds his ground and deflects the colossal golden energy strike. The red-haired shooter thinks he has won, declaring, "It's over, but our boy is already moving with a red magical blade." Oscar is standing on business as he controls a blue orb with his green magic. He looks up with a confident smirk. Trinity looks completely shocked as his gun ejects the spent casing. He wonders how the MC managed to dodge or shield against a bullet that an acceleration spell should never be fast enough to stop. Oscar directs the blue orb with a stream of green magic right at the red-haired gunman. Trinity is losing his mind in shock, shouting about how a low-rank mage could possibly pull this off. The MC keeps his hand extended as magic and blood spray from the point of impact. His response? Like you'd even get it. A small object hits the dirt as the protagonist catches his breath under the stars. He let out a relieved groan. Walking over the defeated Trinity, Oscar reaches down to grab his loot. He calls the whole encounter a massive pain. The MC examines the intricate gun, breaking down its functions of acceleration and penetration. He admits that weapon was actually a serious problem. Oscar explains that his wind shield was layered specifically to reduce friction. Instead of piercing him, the bullet slid across the surface without punching through. Sprinting through a field of flowers, Oscar knows he would be dead if that spell layering failed. He needs to study weapon-based magic at the White Tower, but his priority is getting Fran and Mr. Ivan to safety. Oscar remembers sensing 4 presences when the fight began. Max, the old man, and Trinity are down, but one shadowy figure is still out there somewhere. Shouting for Fran to hang on, Oscar prepares to handle the next threat. Turning to face the pursuer, he simply goes, "Hi there." Fran tells Ivan to run ahead while he handles things. He promises he is built different and stronger than he looks. Placing a hand on the boy's shoulder, Ivan reluctantly agrees to leave him behind. Fran smirks at the approaching enemy. He asks why the guy isn't chasing Ivan and if he was specifically sent for the boy. The dark-haired member of the gunslinger crew laughs. He grabs his sword and asks if Fran thinks sending the old man away will save him. Magic swirls as Fran admits he's always been curious about what makes the 4 tower mages so special. The attacker leaps into the air with his sword raised. He declares he will figure out the secret by killing the boy first. Magic patterns appear on the ground as Fran fires a massive wind blade. The swordsman is forced to react as the green energy arc tears toward him. The attacker smirks and deflects the strike with his blade. He taunts the boy, asking if that little trick was really all he had. Moving with high speed, the swordsman stabs Fran right in the chest. He tells the boy to make the fight more interesting. The villain starts laughing, but his expression twists into confusion. He questions why the strike to the heart felt so smooth as the blade slid in. Realizing something is wrong, the attacker pulls his blade back. A green magical glow pulses from the wound instead of blood. The attacker is coughing up blood on the ground while Fran stands over him. Our boy casually mentions his body works a bit differently. A serious man in a dark uniform holds a document, looking ready for the next move. The gunslinger is completely diffed and slumped over his sword. Fran looks down with a glowing green orb in his chest. Pushing the body aside, Fran accidentally almost steps in the pool of blood. He lets out a quick oops. Watching from the trees, Oscar realizes Fran is an anomaly-type mage. He's windborn, meaning he can literally turn parts of himself into wind. The former Tower Master explains that physical attacks pass right through someone with this ability. Without magic or aura, you can't even touch him. Oscar calls out, making the boy flinch in surprise. Fran stands over the body and asks when the protagonist even arrived. Oscar looks a bit annoyed at the boy's smug attitude. He snaps him back to reality by asking where Ivan went. Panic sets in as Fran starts screaming for Mr. Ivan to come back. The MC can only watch this kid lose his mind. Considering the mage's potential, Oscar believes Fran could eventually surpass most high mages. He says, "I can sense something over that way. Let's go." Fran shouts in surprise as they move through the dark forest. Looking over the rural landscape at sunrise, Ivan the herbalist expresses his gratitude. He places a hand on Fran's shoulder and tells him, "I mean it. Truly, thank you. If it weren't for you two, I wouldn't have lived to see this morning." Fran gets flustered and tries to deflect the credit to the MC. Oscar stares ahead while the young mage peeks his back. The hero admits he missed the swordsman and tells the boy, If you hadn't been there, things could have gone real bad. You really saved the day. Ivan thanks the boy while Oscar watches with a smile. Fran blushes and asks if everything is finally over, but the MC responds that they aren't finished quite yet. Fran asks the protagonist why Devor Paul is so obsessed with these herbs. Oscar explains that the man won't quit and will definitely try something else now that the assassination failed, as this land is the most fertile area in the heart of Siren. A massive industrial complex pumps smoke into the sky while waste poisons the Wolf River downstream. The soil is at risk, and Oscar listens with a serious face as he realizes their last hope of growing anything will be gone if the factories get any closer. Ivan looks up at the MC with a heavy expression. He asks if Oscar was referring to the promise made by the Fourth Tower Master, Leonard Itters, when he mentioned owing the White Tower. Oscar confirms he knows all about it. In the past, people hunted the herb gatherers and called them witches because they sold mysterious concoctions from boiling pots. This history forced them to live in the shadows until everything changed. A hooded figure appears in the woods behind the hidden gatherers. It is Leonard Itters, the Fourth Tower Master, approaching the outcasts. Leonard Itters holds out his hand and invites the gatherers to Siren. He promises, "Come to Siren, let it be your home, for you and for your children. No one will ever look down on you here." He was known as the sharpest mind of his generation. Processing the weight of the story, Oscar keeps his eyes fixed on the herbalist. Oscar explains he read about this invitation in the ancient records passed down to Tower Masters. Herb gatherers from across the continent flocked to Siren after that, finally finding a place where they belonged. Even Fran realizes how significant this moment is. Ivan smiles gently while explaining how the White Tower gave his ancestors pride. He asks how they could ever turn their backs on the tower now. Oscar bows deeply to the old herbalist to show his respect. Ivan smiles back and declares that the White Tower stands with him from this moment on. Ivan asks if the hero has a plan to deal with the Empire. Oscar mentions he can't leave the land unguarded, though he jokes that the serious conversation ruined his big emotional moment. The old man worries Devor will move while the Empire delays their response. Oscar is standing on business and assures him the Empire will move faster than light today. Our boy grins with total confidence. Lord Vince frantically packs boxes in his office while someone tells him to get out now. He screams in frustration. The official contract for the Cadena flu cure is being signed today, and his world is falling apart. A doctor flinches as a door slams shut, while a voice warns him that he's dead if he tries to run. Walker from the Imperial Bureau of Internal Security bursts into the room, and the villain is absolutely cooked. He orders Devor Paul to freeze and confirms the target's identity, while the man shivers on the floor. Holding up a document with a red seal, Walker announces Devor is under arrest for conspiracy, murder, and attempting to destroy a national treasure. Devor's jaw drops in pure shock. The businessman tries to claim he's a respectable citizen, but Walker tells him to shut his mouth. A subordinate moves in with the handcuffs to end the man's career. One of the gunslingers starts sweating as he realizes the situation is way over his head. He desperately looks for an exit strategy before the hammer drops. Devor smirks and asks if he can light a cigar before they haul him away. Walker stares him down with a cold, unblinking gaze. Walker's patience is gone, and he orders his men to drag the criminal out. Devor screams about his high-level backers, but Walker diffs him by saying he doesn't know or care who they are. Devor Paul looks completely broken, sweat pouring down his face as he clutches a cigar. A gloved hand snatches the cigar away from the cuffed criminal, who is absolutely cooked. Holding the confiscated cigar, Walker smirks and remarks, "Funny how criminals always have expensive taste." Background goons are desperately claiming they did nothing, while Devor Paul asks the chief for a moment of his time. One of the subordinates wonders why the entire team had to rush here in a single day for a guy like Devor. Walker shuts down the confusion by stating the order came straight from the top. Walking past the bookshelves, Walker explains that His Majesty has a soft spot for the White Tower. When the subordinate asks for clarification, the chief simply says it's grown-up business. Looking deep in thought, Walker admits he never understood the appeal of the White Tower. They had their glory days 20 years ago, but throwing a bird with broken wings into the sky won't stop the eventual fall. Walker asks his subordinate Doran how old he is, and the young man confirms he is 23. This means Doran was only 3 years old when the world changed. Flashbacks show a young Doran celebrating with a massive crowd during the victory over the Demonkin. It was the day humanity finally won their freedom. The White Tower used to glow with immense power while the world cheered for them. Walker crushes his cigar into an ashtray, wondering why the higher-ups are still obsessed with that ancient aura. Walker tells Doran to move out because they have one more stop to make. The subordinate is surprised since he thought they were done for the day. Stepping away from the group, Walker orders the rest of the team to clock out while he and Doran head west. He is standing on business as he prepares to shut down illegal factories near the Wolf River. The chief looks thoughtful as he reveals his true motivation. He is personally handling these factories as a way of saying, thanks to Oscar Crujan and Fran Sirius for taking out Jack's gunslingers. Following behind his boss, Doran asks if they can stop for food on the way. Walker gives him a flat no, telling him he can eat once the job is finished. Oscar Crujan and Fran stand before the White Tower as the sun sets. Fran is ready for a drink now that things are over, but Oscar insists on reporting to Master Grimwiz first. Fran panics and sprints away the moment he hears a voice, claiming he has urgent business elsewhere. Hamel Grimwiz, the deputy tower master, arrives and assumes his old eyes are playing tricks on him since Fran is already gone. Hamel laughs off the kid's quick exit and praises Oscar for pulling off something remarkable during his supposed stroll. He leads the way to his office so they can discuss the official report. Walking through the decorated halls, Hamel notices that Oscar seems a bit troubled. He asks the young man if something happened to put him in such a somber mood. Hamel gives Oscar a knowing look and asks if Fran mentioned anything to him. Seeing the reaction, the deputy tower master realizes Oscar is already aware that something is up. Oscar asks what is going on, and the news is heavy. The Sirius family has reached out because they want Fran back, leaving Oscar to wonder if his friend is actually leaving the White Tower. According to the family, the matter is already settled with Fran directly. Hamel looks thoughtful as he relays the message. Oscar remains quiet and pensive, as he realizes even the deputy tower master does not know all the details of this arrangement. A serious man with light gray hair and a sharp tie appears, signaling that the next chapter of this story is about to begin.